Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce John Humphreys, who's going to introduce today's Friedman Conference and let us know a little bit about what Friedman is all about. John Humphreys.
Thank you, Topher. 10 years ago, that means this is the 11th year, but you know, the 10th sounds better, so you can have the 10th if you like. We've actually never had the Friedman Conference outside of Sydney, full stop. So it's not just Albury that's missed out. Everywhere's missed out. And at my wife's insistence, definitely Melbourne missed out. So I love coming to these events. Not everyone agrees. I heard a comment today that many of you might have heard before, some of you may have said before. You go into these conferences, all they do is talk, where's the action? Have you heard that? I find it somewhat of a strange criticism. I think conferences are probably defined by the fact that you're coming together and talking, that's the definition. But it does raise the question of what exactly it is that they're expecting in terms of action. It's a somewhat political conference. What political action are they expecting at the conference? I hope not a coup. So I think there is some important things we get from a conference like this. One is I just enjoy it, so I find it fun. I hope you enjoy this weekend. The other one is that building a community, building a network, I think is an underappreciated art. Perhaps somewhat a dying art in our modern age, and we are contributing to building a community here, building the networks that help us to cooperate and coordinate better in the future, and I think that matters. But there's a third point, and that is very often when people get into power, when sides get into power or when a movement gets into power, they focus so much on getting into power that they don't have a well-refined plan of what to do once they get it. That's true of most people in major parties, no offense. But this is true of a lot of people. They know what they're against, they're angry, they fight to overturn what they're against. And then what? That's important. Most revolutions end badly. They might have overturned a terrible thing, but until you know what comes next, most revolutions end badly. Now I suggest, probably need some sort of political revolution, but we desperately need to know what we're moving towards. And that requires some of the work to go in beforehand through talking to our friends and building community. We want to work out what that agenda is. Falling into power without working it out first, I think, is very dangerous, and you cannot do it on the fly. If you don't go into a political moment or politics with a well-formed plan, you can't work it out later. People who try end up falling woefully short. So what we're doing here is hopefully refining our ideas, making friends, enjoying ourselves, building networks, and refining our ideas so that we can actually move towards a better place. So that's why I think these conferences are still hugely important, even if we don't stage a coup every time we have a political conference. That's not a recommendation. Friedman Conference is not just named after Milton Friedman. This is the spiel some of you will have heard before because I do it at the beginning of every of the 10, now 11 Friedman conferences. And sometimes people say, oh, the Milton Friedman Conference. I go, no, I didn't say Milton. I'm a big fan of Milton Friedman, big fan. He inspired my honours thesis. He inspired me going into postgraduate, doing my PhD. He inspired my politics. I believe he's a great example of what I talked about before in terms of refining your ideas so that you know where you're going next. And he was a great convincer and influencer. Because when he spoke, you couldn't help but like him. And when you like a person, you're more willing to listen to him. So he's a great influencer towards a smaller government, a more classical, liberal, pseudo-conservative, whatever you want to call it, distrust of central authority. And he was a great influencer towards that. But he had a son called David Friedman, who was one of the great radical theoreticians on the anti-government or anti-big government side of the argument. And then he had a son who became a radical pioneer of quirky new ideas of how to try and achieve freedom. So we've got the great influencer, the great radical philosopher, and the great doer. And so I thought that one family, that 3 generations of one family, nicely encapsulated all of the things we'd try to put together when we brought people together. I got to say, though, I feel a little bit worried or concerned, that's not the right word. I'm not envious of Patri's son. I don't know what they're going to do next. Right? I don't know where the next generation goes in that family, but we've got a few years before we have to find that. So the Friedman Conference is about trying to bring people together to work out our ideas and to work for a smaller government, one with more individual autonomy, one with less centralization of political power. That's why we do it, that's why we're here, and thank you all for coming. Now, that's enough from me. We're going to dive in to the actual speakers, and the first one we've got up Segue. Our universities are broken. This is not unrelated. I'm linking it. Our university system is broken, and it is, as many of you probably would know, already well and truly taken over in most parts by people with a left-wing agenda, sometimes a dangerously, stupidly left-wing agenda. The idea of conservatives, libertarians, non-leftists, sane people still in academia, they're becoming rarer and rarer. I was briefly an academic. I used to have some friends who were not crazy. They're disappearing. There's a few left. And that's why I'm very happy that we have one of the good academics left coming here to open this conference. One of the more interesting and entertaining political speakers of our moment, I think. I really enjoy it whenever I hear from him, and I really enjoy the suspenders. Like Topher says, he does always put us to shame in terms of looking a bit too spiffy.